It's the first place in the whole country to see the sun in the morning.
So we drilled in 2004, and sure enough the water was there and there's plenty of it, and it was exceptionally high quality, high mineral content, perfect pH, and it came out of the ground crystal clear. It was just amazing and beautiful taste. It's nature. It's one of the most unique areas in Australia, and you can't see this anywhere else. And to try and capture all this and put it in a bottle is a task in itself. So we believe we've managed to do it with the brand Mount Warning Spring Water. Mount Warning Spring Water is bottled at source at the base of Mount Warning. The product itself is nature condensed. It's to bring all the facets into this bottle with the quality of the water for you to drink.
I'm here today with Shaun Martin from Mount Warning Water. Shaun, welcome.
Thank you.
Shaun, you've got an enterprising activity here that's a passion of yours. Maybe share a little bit about that before we learn more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'll tell you a bit about my family history on the farm. My great-grandfather moved up to this area in the 1850s. He was from Sydney. They just gold mined at Drake. Had enough money and they bought a farm at Byingham. He was a timber getter, that's a cedar, chasing cedar trees. My great-grandfather was born at Byingham, and so was my grandmother. As the family grew, and as they grew up with Aboriginal kids, and they camped in the creeks and used to go down to Fingal and Chindra every Christmas holidays with Aboriginal kids. So then they moved up this way. In 1904, I think they first selected up here, and the reason my great-grandfather selected this particular property was because there was water tussocks, which told him that there was a lot of water, so he needed the water to water his bullocks because he was also a timber getter. So they had to move in. They had to clear the place by law, and they had to build a bark hut within a certain given time. They had to have a 5-wire fence as a boundary fence. So people say, oh, you know, why they clear it, but they had no choice because there was legislation back then. In the 1930s, he stopped being a timber getter and went into the dairy industry. And they became a cream producer, and he had pigs and so forth. And then my grandma, she married a returned soldier from the First World War. He died of tuberculosis and left her to raise 6 children. She was a very proud woman, so she would not take any government handouts. So she just refused any of that, so she raised the children by herself. She had the water tested for the dairy in the 1950s, and they told her it was exceptionally good quality, but no one thought about bottling water then. So then my mum and dad bought the farm off my grandma in the 60s, a couple of years before I was born. And then they bought the next door neighbour's farm for that as well. And they continued the dairy. And in the 1970s, deregulation, they had to go into cream, sorry. Go out of cream into bulk milk. That more or less took the money out of it, so Dad had to go off and work in the sugar cane industry or in the sugar mill. And then my mum, she kept on dairying, so we grew up dairying cows. And then in 2000, deregulation hit, but prior to that I met my wife Tessa from Holland, and we bought the next door neighbour's farm as well. So the farm grew from its original holding of 200 and something odd acres, now it's 700 acres. Fantastic. So in 2000, well, we geared the farm up to, the call cry then was go big or go bust with dairy. So you had to put a new dairy plant in, we put underground irrigation, invested heavily in tractors and so forth. 2000, the deregulation hit, and prices went from 56 to 60 cents down to 18 cents. It was costing us 30 cents a litre to produce the milk, so we got out of it. We lost a lot of money. We were going to go into tourism. We thought cabins, or initially had a stupid idea of putting an adventure tourism theme thingy with flying foxes and stuff. It's like bungee jumping. Thought that didn't take off. And then so then I remember my grandma, they had water tested, said it was very good quality. So we got a water diviner out, we found where the main flow of water is on the property. We drilled down 80 metres, had the water tested, it came out exceptionally good quality, it comes out crystal clear. Similar to the European waters, Evian and so forth. And so then we went down the track of bottling water. And so we established Mount Warning Spring Water 10 years ago. Started following that. That's for cafes and restaurants. We went to the premium end with Sam Pelley's. Then about 4 years ago, I got in touch with some Aboriginal friends of mine from down at Fingal, and we established a company called Yaru Water. And we built the company, signed 51% of it over to our partners, and so they made it majority owned Aboriginal. With that money, that gets invested back into training and leadership skills, and we target that with corporate Australia. Coles are a great supporter, Sofitel's another supporter. Coles take most of our water, make the majority of it now, and with Coles they also do training in-house in their own. They have an Indigenous plan as well, and yeah, so it's been going all well since then.
Fantastic, fantastic. You talked at length, it seemed to roll off your tongue, the history of the place and your own family connection and culture.
Yeah. Is
the notion of legacy or leaving something as part of that journey of history important to you?
Yeah, very important. That's probably a core value. I think that's what we were brought up with. You know, when we were kids, we were brought up with the stories of our grandfathers, our great-grandfather, our grandfather. So yeah, so it's instilled into you that you're building something for the next generation. And,
fantastic.
And even recently, we've had a letter. 6 weeks ago, we had a letter from this Chinese company, and they said they wanted to buy. We often get this at present. I don't know what it is being bombarded with at present. They want to buy the land, the water rights, the whole lot, and we said we're not interested, you know, and they're offering ridiculous money. But we said we're more than happy to do a partnership, but no, the property and the enterprise must stay for the next generation, because once it's gone, it's gone. You don't get it back there.
Sure. Yeah. And so you mentioned your grandma there and her resilience to do it alone and to be self-reliant.
Yeah.
It's come down the generations. And
it's not always a good thing.
Well, but part of the enterprising culture ensemble that we're bringing together is good people doing good things.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to aspire to be self-reliant.
Yeah, it is, but it's also good to try and get help, you know, to put your hand out sometimes, and not, sometimes it can be a bit of a problem. I think let go sometimes, and let other people help you.
Well, maybe a different way to express the same theme there is that opening up to collaboration can lead to a more creative outcome.
100%.
And more creative outcomes can be more constructive all round.
That's right.
And you mentioned about the Indigenous partnership that you've created and formed. And that's part of the Mount Warning connection, and the water is very important to the Indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you as part of the partnership?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's where white Australia has missed out, I think, a lot. I think the Kiwis have done it well, just by simply seeing that the hakas perform before the rugby match. You know, like, well, I don't know why there's not an Australian Indigenous war dance before the footy match or the rugby match. And I think where Australia has really missed the mark is that we haven't. Well, maybe it's a bit on both sides. I think the Aboriginal culture doesn't like to share too much of what it is, because they've got rights to be suspicious. And I think the white fellas haven't embraced it enough. And it's quite a beautiful culture. And if you hear the stories about Mount Warning and the significance of it, and as far as the song lines and the first place to see the sun, and these stories go right across the country from this particular place. And it's something that should be embraced and be very proud of. You know, we haven't done that.
One of my ambitions, and one of the reasons for holding the event in the Wollumbar, is to shine a light on Wollumbin and Mount Warning, with a cultural. Mount Warning's the modern name, Wollumbin's the Indigenous ancient name.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a divide between the two. There could be a flow between the two.
100% on that. And we, as I said, we should be as proud of the Aboriginal culture as what the Aboriginals are. I think that that's the good thing about our partners, Kyle and those fellas. You know, they're very passionate about keeping that culture and their stories going. And too many of the young fellas today, they've lost that. They've lost it, you know, and they've probably lost their place a bit because of that.
Sure. Well, you mentioned you've got 700 acres. Do you have any other plans to maybe bring value to the property?
We're in the process of putting a new plant in. We are hoping in talks with China to do some joint ventures as far as getting open up markets in Asia. We've got interest for the product in America as well. Of course, we want to also go into flavoured waters using local Indigenous produce. ideally to get Indigenous farmers to grow the produce, and we'd buy it off them to value add to our product. And of course, we want to put more emphasis on training. So we want to bring other Indigenous kids in from out west or wherever it may be, look, even Redford and Sydney, and they'll sit with a course with our partners who they've got another company called Bunham, it's a training division. And so these young fellows will learn how to use filling lines, labelling machines, so they go about real skills. So when they go back, they can, a filling line or a labelling machine doesn't matter if you're making biscuits or making water or you're making coffee. The principles are the same. So they'll go away with real skills. So that's the next thing. And then maybe I still wouldn't mind doing the tourism with the cabins one day.
Sure. Well, all of that is possible, and the more alliances and opportunities that you create in this space, it inspires other entrepreneurs to follow. So some of those guys who get the training, they'll go, I want to create that ecotourism opportunity at Shaun's property or something. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and creates leadership.
And your own leadership in this space is to be admired. Is there something else you want to share with those who are coming together for the Infinite Choices Convention about your leadership or leadership in general?
Share as in words of wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got much of that. I think it's the only way forward. You've got to work as a collaboration. Like it's, if you segregate yourself, of course it's harder. Team efforts are always a lot better.
Well, I remember you saying before that you've got plans to make your property more sustainable and investment in those spaces. Now they take time because you're by yourself, but if there was more collaborative frameworks and multiple users of the property who are in alignment with your values and the culture of the place, that could upscale those efforts and endeavours.
Yeah, that's right, mate. That's one thing we thought about. Solar and stuff, because we are at present we're carbon neutral, so we buy carbon credits, we offset them against our footprint, and that money gets invested back into solar or wind power. But we do want to do more of our own solar ourselves, so we become carbon negative. We actually produce more electricity than what we use, or more green energy. But so if we could get other people involved who want to invest in that and even put the power back on the grid, that's for sure.
There's answers everywhere, Shaun, and you're part of solutions and answers in this region, and I thank you for your time today.
No worries, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaun.